Imagine being called a witch by your mother-in-law all because of a Halloween costume. That's exactly what happened to me. And now my husband's entire family thinks I'm dangerous. I married my husband about a year ago, and we've been together for about 3. I don't know his parents all too well, mainly because he had made a point to keep a fair amount of distance from them. But during all the wedding planning and events, I thought it would be nice to be closer with them, especially as both of my parents have passed away several years ago. I encouraged my husband to build more of a relationship with them. However, around the time of the wedding, I started to see a bunch of red flags. I generally chalked them up to wedding stress on them. My husband is their only son. But after the wedding, the red flags started getting even bigger. I was still nothing but kind towards them, but my husband was frustrated and started going low contact with them. So that's the backstory. Now on Saturday, my husband and I went to a friend's birthday party, which was Halloween themed and costumes mandatory. We both got too busy with work, and at last minute, the only costume we could pull together was him wearing a t-shirt that said, "I'm with the witch," and me wearing a black dress I already owned with a black choker necklace. That's it, you guys. The extent of our costume. We took a picture at this party and was put on the socials. The next day, mother-in-law texts hubby and I a screenshot of said picture and writes a message about how concerned she is about us and that she is praying for us. I was confused until my husband reminded me of her caring Christianity. You know, the kind that gets offended if anyone happens to be a different religion. Offended if anyone says, "What the hell?" etc. My husband then starts getting phone calls from random distant and extended family members asking if he's okay. Turns out, Karen has texted my husband's entire extended family, uncles, aunts, cousins, all over the country, the same screenshot of our picture with a long 5-paragraph text asking everyone to pray for her son and that I, her daughter-in-law, is into some dangerous things and is a danger to her son. She doesn't spell out her cockamamie belief that she thinks I am a witch. Instead, she says that I am into bad and dangerous things and that I am dragging her son down with me. And she asks everyone to pray for him. And pray for me too. Bless her heart for being so generous with her prayers, for I am but an evil witch. So of course, the extended family members assume maybe I'm into drugs or I'm poisoning him or some other type of abuse. You can see what this would do for my reputation in this extended family. I text her back and tell her that her actions were uncalled for, and that I will be going NC with her going forward. She responds with daughter-in-law, "We all know you dabble in witchcraft. I am only concerned about my son. I pray for you both." Husband called his father and asked him how he could let her do something like this, but father-in-law doubled down on Karen's accusations. So now my husband has gone NC with his parents too. I feel like I am in a really bad soap opera. This isn't real life. This has to be certifiably insane, right? Part of me feels like NC isn't forever, and that eventually my husband and they will reconnect even if I don't, which does bother me. What would you all do in this situation? Mother-in-law saw a picture of me dressed as a witch for Halloween and has started rumor with entire extended family that I am a dangerous person in her son's life. Separately telling me she thinks I am a witch. Update 1. All right, so remember how my husband and I went no contact with my in-laws after the whole witchcraft scandal? I thought that would put a lid on things and let them simmer down. Nope, I was dead wrong. My mother-in-law, let's call her Karen since it suits her perfectly, went straight into overdrive. Apparently, she couldn't just let it go and accept that maybe her son had married a perfectly ordinary person who isn't conjuring spirits in our basement. No. Karen took no contact as an invitation to launch her own kind of crusade against me. A week after the Halloween party, my husband's aunt, one of the more level-headed members of the family, texted us out of nowhere. She was checking in and asked if we were okay. This already had me side-eyeing my phone because why would she randomly pop up like that? But I played along and responded politely. Then she hit me with, "You know, your mother-in-law is just trying to protect her son. She's so worried. Have you ever thought about just talking things over with her? Maybe even inviting her over for dinner to show her that you're a good influence?" I nearly threw my phone across the room. The audacity. This is the woman who just told half the family I was dabbling in dark arts because I wore a black dress and choker, And now I'm supposed to play the good influence card? I politely told the aunt that we were handling things on our end and that there would be no dinner invite in the near future. Thank you very much. But after that, my husband finally checked his Facebook, and let me tell you, I was not ready for the drama he discovered. Apparently, Karen took to her Facebook to subtly air out her concerns. Now, to anyone who didn't know us, it probably looked like a sweet, concerned mother posting about her only son who was falling into a dark place and how she was praying for his safety. She added that she didn't want to lose him to evil influences and asked her prayer warriors to help her break these chains around his life. Oh, and she included a blurred out version of the Halloween picture. Yes, she literally took our photo, added some kind of weird, spooky filter, blurred our faces, and then posted it with this diatribe. The comments section was an absolute mess. There were people telling her she was brave for speaking up, others throwing Bible verses around, and a couple of relatives speculating about what kind of dark influences I might have brought into the family. One cousin actually suggested that my witchcraft could affect future children and asked Karen if she was concerned about evil spirits in her grandkids. I was absolutely gobsmacked. I mean, it's one thing to gossip, but this level of public spectacle? I felt like I'd stumbled into some sort of cult documentary. My husband saw the post and immediately wanted to report it. But since it was technically just vague booking without naming us directly, it didn't really go against any platform rules. Instead, he decided to post a simple 2-sentence statement on his own page, basically saying, "I am not in any danger, nor am I influenced by evil. Please respect my family's privacy and boundaries." He left it at that. No rant, no further explanations. I was proud of him for keeping it short and classy, but of course, it just added fuel to the fire. The post got his mom's attention because, oh boy, she was in his messages within minutes. She went off, claiming that by denying the truth, he was only allowing evil to take deeper root, and that she was more determined than ever to pray for his salvation. I could feel his frustration building as he read her messages. When he didn't respond, she called him, and after a solid hour of arguing, he ended the call and told me he needed to go for a drive to clear his head. When he got back, he was carrying an old shoebox. I had no idea where it came from, but he sat down on the couch with it and looked at me with this mixture of sadness and anger. He told me that his mom had kept this box in the attic filled with stuff from his teenage years that she deemed concerning. Turns out she had given him an ultimatum over the phone. Either he returned to the family, whatever that meant, and released himself from my influence, or she would expose his secrets to the entire family. Now, I have to admit, my curiosity was piqued. I knew he had some rocky years as a teenager. Who doesn't? But he never seemed the type to have anything earth-shattering hidden in a shoebox. So, with his permission, I opened it up. Inside were random trinkets from his high school days, a couple of comic books, some CDs, all rock music, which was apparently Satan's soundtrack in her eyes. A notebook filled with poetry that was mostly angsty, and a small bundle of sage tied with twine. My husband chuckled as he explained that he'd bought the sage with a friend because they'd heard it could cleanse bad vibes after a particularly rough patch with his parents. It was harmless teenage stuff, and yet his mother had apparently kept it as evidence of his fall into darkness. It felt so ridiculous, but at the same time, I could tell this wasn't just funny for him. It hurt. He told me that growing up, he was always labeled as the rebellious one because he didn't conform to every single one of his mom's beliefs. She'd even taken him to see their pastor multiple times, hoping he'd see the light. And here she was, years later, weaponizing these old memories to try to push him into line again. This was starting to feel less like family drama and more like psychological warfare. My husband was visibly worn out, and I was furious on his behalf. To add to the absurdity, the next morning, a local pastor, someone his mom knew, left a voicemail on his phone, inviting him to meet and discuss his struggles. We didn't even know this pastor, yet somehow Karen had roped him in. The plot thickened even further when my husband's dad, who had stayed mostly silent through all of this, decided to call us that evening. He told my husband that he understood his frustrations, but that family is family, and that it was time to forgive. He went on to say that his mother's heart was in the right place, and she was only doing what any loving mother would do. My husband lost it, telling him that what she was doing was manipulative and destructive, not loving. When his dad tried to say that it was all out of concern, my husband finally said, "If she cared about me, she wouldn't be trying to control me. She'd be trying to understand me." I was so proud of him for standing his ground, but the conversation didn't end well. His dad sighed, said he hoped we'd come to our senses, and hung up. We've now blocked both of his parents on social media and are staying no contact. But I can't shake this feeling that Karen isn't done. There's something unsettling about her persistence, like she truly believes I've bewitched her son. It's honestly terrifying how far she's willing to go to save him, especially considering the fact that there's nothing to save him from. We're just two people who love each other and want a normal, happy life without being accused of dark magic. But I have a feeling this battle isn't over. Update 2. All right, buckle up because things went from frustrating to downright surreal. Just when I thought going no contact and blocking my mother-in-law on social media might be the end of her antics, she decided to take things up several notches. A couple of days after my last update, my husband and I were enjoying a quiet evening at home when I got an unexpected message request on Instagram from an account called Prayers for Daniel, with a profile picture of a cross and a sunset. You'd think it was some random religious spam account, right? Wrong. Turns out this was a full-blown social media campaign orchestrated by none other than my mother-in-law herself. Inside that account were multiple posts about Daniel, her lost son, my husband, and they were all dripping with passive-aggressive prayers for his soul to return to the light. There were blurry, paparazzi-style photos of us. Seriously, she'd snapped these during family events without us knowing, along with captions like, "Praying that he will be freed from dark influences," and "The battle for Daniel's soul is not over." The kicker? She tagged every distant family member, church friend, and anyone else in her sphere of influence to spread her message. She'd even tagged my husband's workplace and old high school friends. When my husband saw the account, he went white as a sheet. He started scrolling through post after post, horrified. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. She was going full public smear campaign mode. People from his past, friends who hadn't spoken to him in years, started messaging him, asking if he was all right. One old buddy even called him to check if he was doing okay mentally. My husband had to explain, yet again, that no, he was not under some dark influence, and that he was actually happier and healthier than ever, thanks to escaping his mother's toxic grip. And of course, Karen's reach didn't end there. The next day, I got a call from my work's HR department. Apparently, someone had anonymously emailed them a link to the Prayers for Daniel page and attached a lengthy message about how they were concerned that my influence was unhinged and unstable. According to HR, the email claimed I was practicing occult rituals and dragging my husband into dangerous practices, and that they were just looking out for my company's safety. Yes, my mother-in-law tried to jeopardize my job. She didn't stop at embarrassing us publicly. She was now actively trying to ruin my career. I couldn't believe this was happening. I spent over an hour with HR trying to explain the situation without sounding like a conspiracy theorist. They were mostly understanding, but I could tell they were rattled. Even though I wasn't in trouble, the fact that she'd managed to shake up my workplace with this was infuriating. After that, my husband sat me down and said it was time to take legal action. He had reached his limit, and honestly, so had I. We started looking into what our options were to deal with this digital harassment. While we were figuring out our legal recourse, another bombshell dropped. My husband's mom had apparently reached out to his ex-girlfriend from years ago, someone he hadn't spoken to since college, to dig up more dirt on him and see if she could rope her into this campaign. She must have thought that his ex would eagerly join forces with her in this rescue mission. Unfortunately for her, this ex-girlfriend actually has a good head on her shoulders. She messaged my husband directly, telling him about the bizarre messages she was getting and expressing her genuine concern. She shared screenshots with him, and we couldn't believe what we were reading. In her messages to his ex, Karen had gone on a rant about how dark forces had entered his life again, painting herself as the only person willing to stand up against it. She asked if the ex had ever noticed signs of dark interests in him back when they were dating. The ex shut her down, telling her that if anything, he'd probably been influenced negatively by his mother's suffocating behavior, and that it was Karen who had driven a wedge between him and everyone else. She told Karen that my husband seemed much happier without her constant interference, and that maybe she should let go and let him live his life. Obviously, that didn't go over well, but honestly, I couldn't have been prouder of his ex for standing up to her. After getting those screenshots, my husband and I decided it was time to issue a formal cease and desist letter. We consulted a lawyer who confirmed that Karen's behavior, harassment, defamation, attempting to contact our workplaces, and now rallying people against us, was legally actionable. The lawyer drafted a letter demanding that she immediately halt all slanderous activity and delete every single social media post and fake account related to us. We sent it via certified mail to make sure she'd have to sign for it. For a couple of days, we didn't hear anything back. Karen's Facebook page went silent, and the Prayers for Daniel account was suddenly set to private. I cautiously hoped that maybe, just maybe, she'd gotten the message and would back off. But then, last night, we got an unexpected visitor, my father-in-law. He showed up on our doorstep unannounced, looking absolutely drained. My husband was wary, but we let him in because, honestly, we were desperate for some kind of closure or explanation. As soon as he sat down, he apologized. He told us he'd been caught up in all of Karen's antics for so long that he'd lost sight of what was truly important: his son's happiness. Apparently, after receiving the cease and desist letter, Karen had gone ballistic, accusing him of betraying her for not protecting their son. She accused him of being under the same dark spell, which seemed to shake him enough to see how irrationally she was acting. For the first time, he realized how far she'd spiraled into this delusional obsession of saving my husband. But then he dropped a bombshell. Karen had been seeing some sort of spiritual healer behind his back for months, and this healer was supposedly feeding her ideas about dark energy and cleansing her family's lineage. It seemed Karen had gone all in on this idea that my husband was somehow tainted by these imaginary dark forces, and it was only now, after her obsession had torn the family apart, that my father-in-law saw how deep she was in it. After his confession, he said he didn't know what else to do. He was scared for Karen's mental health and didn't want to abandon her, but he also admitted he couldn't support her in this crusade anymore. He said he'd spoken to her pastor, hoping that someone in the church could intervene and maybe talk some sense into her. But Karen had refused, saying that only her spiritual healer understood what was happening. My husband and I just sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything. I mean, this had gone from annoying mother-in-law drama to borderline cult behavior, all because she's convinced herself that I'm somehow endangering her son's soul. And now she's paying some shady healer who's encouraging her delusions. We don't know what's next. My father-in-law left, promising to do his best to handle her, whatever that means. We told him that while we appreciated his honesty, we couldn't let her back into our lives until she got serious help. He seemed to understand, but it's hard to tell if he'll be able to convince her to let this go. For now, we're sticking to our no-contact boundary, and thankfully, the cease and desist seems to have spooked her enough to keep her online harassment at bay. But there's this lingering dread, like this isn't over yet. I never imagined marrying my husband would lead to this kind of drama. It's like we're stuck in some twisted movie plot. If she really does try to reach out again, I think we're going to have to take more drastic measures. I just hope it doesn't come to that.